I'm really excited now to share the word with you because I'm very passionate about this particular passage in the Bible, and you will see so many reasons why. Because what we are going to study now, it's really powerful and encouraging. So let us start with the account in Joshua 2. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. "Go, look over the land," he said, "especially Jericho." So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. Let's see a little bit of a context here. So Moses has died, and now Joshua is leading the Israelites to the promised land. So after 40 years of wandering through the desert, now they're camped on another side of the river Jordan, ready to finally enter the promised land. And now this is the time when the Lord is telling to Joshua, "Now get ready, because in 3 days we will cross the river Jordan. Now this is your time. I'm giving you the land." But this land is not empty. The land is occupied. So there are people living there, and that's why Joshua sends out 2 spies to look around the city, to look around Jericho, to see how is the land, because they just heard so many things about the beautiful land. And he also wants to know what was the mentality of people in the city. And now the first stop for them is the house of Rahab. So now this is a little bit weird. Here we have 2 spies on a top secret mission sent from Joshua, and they just went to the house of the prostitute, as you do if you were a spy, I guess. And now this is really one of those places in the Bible when I wish God gave us a bit more details. Because you don't just read something like, okay, then we had 2 spies, they went and they found themselves in the house of the prostitute. Hang on a second, what just happened here? And why on earth would they go into the house of the prostitute? Because they are Israelites, so we would expect them to obviously know the 10 Commandments, know everything about or against adultery, and we, for no reason, wouldn't expect them to go into the house of a prostitute. So how come this happened? They had a very clean mission. They needed to secretly gather information about the enemy, obviously without their knowledge, without being noticed. So what kind of information they were looking for? Probably about the city wall, the size of it, what is the army around the town, what are people thinking of, how they feel, because they knew that the Israelites are waiting on another side of the river. But, however, they went into the house of the prostitute. So I would imagine if you were a spy, first thing, what would you do if you're going somewhere? At least you should be undercover, right? At least you would try to look like the people you're going to, because you don't want to be so obvious. And as they were coming from another side of the river Jordan, so I can imagine they needed to swim, they were probably wet. Then if they wanted not to be noticed, they probably needed to find some clothes from people who live in that town, because if they came with their own clothes, of course, they will be obvious straight away. And I really don't know how they looked like when they approached the city, but I could imagine that they started observing the city walls. They were taking great interest in that. Maybe they were even talking in their own language. So it wasn't very difficult for the city guards to actually suspect something. However, we can see that obviously they didn't have James Bond on anyone like him in that time, so they were completely dreadful as spies. Because as the moment they entered the city gates, they were discovered. Their mission failed, and they were not even aware of that. But Rahab saw that, and she was aware, and that's why she took them to their house. So who is Rahab? Yes, the Bible says she was a prostitute or harlot. Some people say maybe she was a harlot in a sense. She was an innkeeper. So actually, she had bordel in her house, but still, she was basically at the bottom of the society. Now, let's think, what does it mean, or how does it look like to be a prostitute at that time? Well, even today, how was it for her on a daily basis? We know that Jericho was a trade crossover from all the different nations and from different places. So there were lots of travelers who were passing by. And Rahab's house was in the city wall, so she was able to see outside of her window whoever was passing by on that side, even before they entered the city gate. So if she wanted someone, if she eyed maybe some handsome guy, she just needed to pretty herself up and call onto them. But now, imagine, men were coming to Jericho from all around the country. They were coming from long journeys. They were probably a bit smelly and sweaty, and probably her days were not really nice. How was life for her? And what did other women were talking about her? Oh, I saw there was someone's husband enter into Rahab's house. Oh, look at her, the prostitute. Can you imagine how many marriages did she ruin? Or how many families did she torn apart? And was that actually her choice? Or was there a case that when she was a little girl, her dad thought, oh, thank you very much. Her dad thought that you can go, to the king's harem, it will be good for you there. We don't know actually anything about her background. But did she, as a prostitute, have any fears in life? Probably she did. But was she allowed to dream? Did she have dreams? Did she have dreams of being free from this life and from this condition she was in? So now let's imagine. Rahab was looking outside the window, and she spotted the spies firstly. She saw their interest in city walls, and she was trying to get their attention. Oh, but look at this. They didn't take care of that. They didn't pay attention. Surely that was a little bit strange, because I'm sure that she didn't get used to people not paying attention to her. So she was trying to see, okay, what was happening? Why are they not interested in me? And maybe because of their language or their clothes, maybe she realized, oh, they are definitely not what they are pretending to be. And she realized they are Israelites. As she was observing them, and then she just saw the guards on the city gates, it wasn't long enough, she realized, oh, well, they will catch them pretty soon. And then she was trying even harder to get their attention to come to her house. And the spies entered, and they were not even aware at that moment that their mission failed, that they were discovered. Because in verse 2, we can read that the king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent his message to Rahab. Bring out the men who came to you and enter your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. Yes, they were discovered. So they came to Rahab's house, and soon after, there was king there, actually. His army was there, asking for this man. It was, of course, not unusual to have men going in and out of Rahab's house. Everyone knew that. It was so obvious in the town. But somehow this was different this time. The king had interest in these two people. And now what happened next, we read in the verse 4 onwards. But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they came from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies of the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan, and as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Now, we can see that Rahab just welcomed the spies in her home, and then she hid them on the roof. Very shortly after, the king was there, and what did Rahab do? Rahab just told them a massive lie. She was lying to king's men. So not only she lied that she didn't know where they came from, and just in a couple of verses after we will see that she exactly knew where they came from, but then she basically sent soldiers on a wild goose chase. Oh, they went this direction, maybe if you go after them quickly, you can catch up with them. Massive, terrible lie. And why would she do that? Because if she was discovered, she would have been dead. She just risked her own life for these spies. But why? And I'm sure the spies were shocked as well. Imagine coming to some new town, straight away finding yourself in a house of a prostitute, and then the king is after you, king is chasing you, and then the prostitute says, oh no, I haven't seen them, they went. They probably didn't expect that this will happen, that someone will put their own life for them. So what Rahab have done next? We read from verses 8. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Now we really have some extraordinary things happening here. Of course, Rahab knew exactly that these spies were from Israel. And not only that, she knew about the Lord. So she said, the Lord is giving you the land. How on earth did she know that? How much did she actually know about the God and his plan for Israel? For some reason, she had the understanding of the Lord, that the Lord is God. And now this is so powerful to see what she was actually saying. It is because of the Lord that they are receiving the land. The Lord has given you the land. She doesn't say, you will conquer the land. She said, the Lord has given you the land. It's all about the Lord. He is the one who is leading Israel, and he is the one who will lead them into the promised land. And then she also tells them what was the state of hearts of people in the city. Everyone in the city is frightened because now Israelites are on that side of the river Jordan. They're camping there, and they know that they will come very soon and the whole city will be destroyed. So their heart melted in fear. And why was that so? They were terrified. And as Rahab said, it wasn't because Israelites had some mighty army. It wasn't because they were great warriors. It was because the people of Jericho heard the stories about the Lord and what the Lord has done for Israelites. Rahab and her whole people in the town are now frightened because of some events that took place 40 or so years ago. When God parted the Red Sea, when he conquered the Amorite kings, they knew what God has done for Israel, and they were afraid of him, of the Lord God of Hebrew. And now, because we actually know what was happening with Rahab after that, this is very interesting to notice here. The whole city is melting in fear. They are terrified. They all heard about the Lord. But then, if they knew, how come they haven't changed? How come they haven't been affected like Rahab? And what actually happened to Rahab? She heard the stories as well. And I think this is now really so powerful, because Rahab only heard stories about the Lord. She never experienced him personally. She hasn't seen any of these events with her own eyes. She maybe wasn't even born when it happened. She never experienced the Lord directly. She didn't even know about 10 commandments and what you need to do in order to be saved. She didn't know, in order for her to be forgiven of her sins, what kind of animal sacrifice should she give and offer to the Lord. She didn't know any of that. She just knew what she heard. And those were stories about his awesome God who parted the Red Sea, awesome God who is doing amazing things for his people, awesome God who is leading the nation in a pillar of fire. Awesome God. And maybe in her heart she was thinking, oh wow, if only I could get to know this awesome God a bit better. She understood the power of the God of Hebrew. And that changed her completely. So this was enough for her to be willing to risk her own life, to put it on the line. Her faith was strong enough that she greeted, welcomed, and then protected those people who are coming to destroy her, her family, and the whole city. So she was facing king of Jericho with his army. She took a stand for God. She took some massive risks. So when was the last time you took a risk for God? When did you have some big decision to make, and then you took a stand for God? And now what is beautiful, we are coming to the verse 11, if you're following with me. Now, we have a moment of Rahab salvation. She declares that the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. I think this is really extraordinary because the Rahab, a pagan woman, a Canaanite, is telling these two spies, your God is the only one. Your God is the true God, and there is no one else. So the whole city was trembling in fear, but it was only Rahab who realized that this God is different. Now the whole city was worshipping their own idols and gods, idols made of clay. They were probably able to lift them up, but these gods haven't done anything. They didn't have any power. And Rahab, on another hand, here is proclaiming the Lord of the Hebrew, how mighty he is, how he has done all of these miraculous things, and how he is now giving the city to the Israelites. So this is the point when Rahab says, I believe, and that changes everything for her. Now I can imagine that as she proclaimed how she believes in God, when did she start believing? How long was she kind of growing her faith? It wasn't on that day, or it wasn't on that time when she took the spies in and then suddenly she was so confident to risk her life. During her life, when she was hearing the stories, her understanding of God was increasing. And she wanted to get to know him better. And now for me it makes sense that it was Rahab, maybe, who spotted the spies firstly. And then when she realized, oh, they're coming from Israel, finally, I have a chance to speak with someone who knows that God. Maybe I can now understand him better. Maybe now I can learn something more about him. And I believe this was a divine plan for Rahab. That's why the spies needed to be there at that time and entered her house. And what is happening now after she proclaimed her faith? In verses 12 and 13, now she gets those two men to promise that they will spare her life and life of her family in an exchange for keeping their presence and their plan a secret. So she says, give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the man assured her. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. Now, it's also so amazing to see how Rahab wasn't interested only about herself and her salvation, She wanted to secure a salvation for her family as well. Now, what is the first thing that you are doing or that you have done when you got saved? Did you want your family and friends and everyone else to get saved as well? Usually when people get saved, yes, that's absolutely wonderful moment, and we want everyone to share that with us because we want them to be saved as well, and we want them to know this awesome God whom we know. And this is now exactly what Rahab has done. She is looking for the assurance that her family and she will be saved and they will escape the judgment of this city and that they will live. And it's interesting even that those spies are now just negotiating a deal that at the end Joshua will need to fulfill. And their own lives are now becoming the guarantee for Rahab's family life that they will live. And now what is happening in verse 15? So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. She said to them, "Go to the hills so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." So now we can see that from the moment that Rahab proclaimed her faith in God, her actions followed this faith. Now we can see all the results of her faith, all the actions that she took. Firstly, she knew exactly where to send the spies so they wouldn't be caught and how to escape. And this is such a wonderful moment that we also can hear about it and listen in the New Testament. In James 2:25, it says that in the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? So now we are looking into the actions or results of Rahab's faith. And are we doing that? Because when we love our God, it will naturally bring the actions. Our faith would naturally bring actions. So what actions of our faith are we usually doing? Are we willing to forgive someone or show grace to somebody? Or are we willing to love someone who might not be so lovable? Are we doing what God calls us to do? That is faith in action. But now it is interesting here to see how Rahab's salvation had some conditions and she had some responsibilities. There were things she needed to do in order to be saved. From verse 17, now the man had said to her, "This oath you made us swear will not be binding us unless, when we enter the land, you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. And unless you brought your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family into your house. If any of them go outside your house into the street, their blood will be on their own heads. We will not be responsible. As for those who are in the house with you, their blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on them. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear." So if she wants to live, she has some responsibilities. So there are 3 conditions that she needed to fulfill. But now this was time for her to act upon what she believed. Now she allowed her faith to be visible, to be very, very visible to everyone who were passing by, because there were 3 conditions. Number 1, spies were telling her, "Yes, we are going to save you, but unless, firstly, you tie the scarlet cord," this one, the red cord in the window. So she needed to hang that red rope on the window so her house will be identified. So when the soldiers will be passing by, they would spare her house. So they will execute the judgment upon the whole city, but because her house will be identified, they won't execute the judgment upon her house. And does this remind you of something else that happened in the Bible before? When the soldiers will pass by, they won't touch your house because it is identified with the red cord. If you remember the Passover, when the Israelites were in Egypt, on the night when they were actually going out, what happened? They needed to sacrifice a lamb and put the red mark on their doors So when the angel of death was coming to kill all the firstborn of Egypt, they would pass by their houses, and Israelites, all the firstborn Israelites, would be saved. And now this is again that picture of salvation, of a blood. Some blood needed to be shed in order for there to be salvation. So that was number one. Number two, unless you have all your family with you, her whole family and relatives needed to be inside of her house. No one should leave the safety of her house. If they go back from when they came from, back to the people of the city, they can't be identified and they will die. And number three was Rahab needed to keep this a secret. Now Rahab had this responsibility in order to save her life. But what about us? Is it the same? Do we have responsibilities once we are saved? Yes, we do. Once we are saved, we do have responsibility to show that salvation to others. Now in verse 21, Rahab said, "Agreed, let it be as you say." So she sent them away and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. A scarlet cord. This is a nice scarlet cord. And what is it actually? It's a rope. Color of scarlet. It is a red color. It will be tied at one end and just drop down the city wall. So this scarlet cord became an instrument of the spies' salvation, because they will go down this cord, this rope, and escape. Their lives will be saved. And then on another hand, because of that scarlet cord that Rahab will put there, Rahab and her family will be saved. They will be able to live. Now this is a picture of salvation through sacrifice, a blood of Christ, blood that needed to be shed for salvation, which is the only way, the blood of Jesus. We know that's the only way how we can be saved. But this story also tells me something else. No matter of your background, you can be saved. And no matter of your background, your family can be saved too. So far, I was pretty impressed with Rahab's faith and really what she was doing as a result of it. But now what happens next, I think, is the real challenge. Sharing your faith, convincing someone, convincing your family about what you believe. So those of you who have tried to share your faith with your families, with your friends, with people you know how difficult it can be sometimes. And now the Bible says the Rahab took her family inside her house, and it just sounds so easy. Yeah, she just took them inside of her house. But how did she actually convince them? Now notice one thing. Rahab didn't get a timeline. She never knew when the Israelites will come. The only thing she knew is that she said to these spies, okay, go there, stay there for 3 days. So she maybe calculated, okay, I have these 3 days. If they would listen to me, then they would go back to the camp, and then maybe after 3 days, some things can start happening. But she actually never had a timeline. All she had was their word that they will come back. And that word was enough for her. And because of that, because she had that great faith, she was regarded as one of the great women of faith. So how much time she had? Let's say 3 days and more. In this time, she needed to convince her whole family to come in her house. And also probably to stock some essentials for them. Because if you are inside of the house, you need to have something to eat, to drink. You need to have something to do because you don't know how long will that take. And she needed to do all of that. Imagine going shopping, going to the market, taking all the stuff inside the house, taking lots of jars of water inside the house. All of that without being too obvious that people start saying, oh, what is she doing? What is happening? Why is she talking so much? And also, how was it for her to speak about this for her family? Can we imagine what kind of conversation she had with, let's say, probably her father and brothers, to convince them firstly? So what were they saying? Oh, so you met some Israel spies. Oh yeah, well, we know you're meeting lots of different men every day. Oh, you hid them in your own house. The enemies who are going to kill us, oh, you hid them. And then you lied to the king? You silly woman. Do you want us all to be killed? Were they very happy when they heard what did she do? I don't think so. Because most probably they were among those non-believers of the city. And then they could be that they were some respectable citizens of the town. Would they like to actually go into a house of a prostitute, even if she was their own family? I don't know how she convinced her family, but I think it must have been pretty difficult. I could just think, based on the verses that we had before, how she was talking about this Lord so passionately, about the Lord who is mighty to save, about the Lord who is doing all of these miraculous things, that they probably believed her. Well, even if they didn't believe her, maybe they thought, well, there's nothing we can lose. And I think she was preaching so well, they ended up being in her house. So I have a question for you. How passionate are we about our own salvation? Are we passionate about the things that we are saved and that we actually know this mighty, awesome God? Are we passionate so that we will share that with other people? Do we actually even care? Will they be saved? Or it's good enough that we are saved? And sometimes you know examples of people whose families maybe didn't want to talk to them anymore because they trusted in God. It can be terrifying for some people sometimes to know that now a family member is believing in Jesus, if they were non-believers. But Rahab, a prostitute, managed to do it. So what about us? There are lots of young people here, people who are studying, people who will get their degrees, people who will be very respectable citizens, and we all are respectable citizens of our towns. Would we be able to share our faith with our family and friends, with other people? So Rahab is an example that can be done if we care. And now, what is happening next? Now we read in Joshua 6, what was happening inside the city of Jericho. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. So Jericho was locked. There was confusion inside the city walls. There was fear. People were paralyzed with fear. That's what the Bible says, terrified, because the city was under condemnation and they knew there are these people over there on that side of the river Jordan and they're coming to destroy us. Destruction was on the horizon. The only hope for them actually was to surrender, to plead for mercy. But have they done it? No. The king was probably more interested into their army to see how they can fortify the walls even more. They might have thought, well, not a chance. They can't break our walls. We have everything that we need to be securely here in this city. Rahab was also imprisoned inside of that city because the end of everything that she knew by that point was inside. But then she was looking at her window and she saw the red cord, the Scarlet Cord. And she knew that she and her family will be saved. And now we can read what the instructions Lord gave to Joshua. So in Joshua 6:2, the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times. with the priests blowing the trumpet. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpet, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in. And now, that was day one. The Israelites are coming. They're crossing the river Jordan. And you can imagine the people in the city. There is confusion, there is fear, and there are screams. They're coming, they crossed the river Jordan, they're here, what are we going to do? We are going to die. And on another hand, there was Rahab. She was full of expectation. Yes, she also saw they are coming. Finally, the day of deliverance is here. So Israelites were coming, and they were walking around the city. And the Bible said they were marching in complete silence. Imagine that. So only thing you heard was the rhythmic pounding of their feet and some horns. I guess it was pretty spooky. But then what was happening inside of Rahab's house? They knew they are going to be saved. But the Israelites turned back, and they were marching towards their camp. And so the Rahab heard someone inside of her house was maybe saying, "What is happening? Look, they're going back. What are they doing? Will they kill us all? What shall we do?" It was a great disappointment for everyone. So now Rahab's family was in desperation, thinking that they have been left. There was no promise, no salvation for them. They've been locked up in this house for who knows how long, all for nothing. And Rahab was just waiting. So think of the patience that Rahab had. She got a promise, but then in this moment, it seems like this promise is just going away. Would you be making some escape plan, thinking, okay, what are we doing now? When they come here, shall we just go and jump, take the cord? Shall we just try to get together with them and trying to be unnoticeable and just walk with them? What shall we do? Do we have any other plans? Do we have escape plan? What is happening? And then the Rahab was just waiting. And I wonder, when things are happening for us in our lives, when we are waiting for the Lord, are we making some other plans? Are we thinking of plans B? Are we thinking of escape plan? So this was a huge test for Rahab, because she could have thought, okay, they just tricked me. What is happening now? As they were going back to their camp. But Rahab was patient. She trusted that promise. Be still and wait for the Lord. So what would you do in this moment? Is there something that you need to do to help out the promise that the Lord has given you? So even Abraham, the father of faith, took things in his own hands, thinking that God's promise needs a little bit of help. So God might be doing something right now in your lives so much bigger than you think. He might be making us wait for 6 days or 6 years or 7 months. He might make us wait for as long as it's necessary, because he has some greater purpose. So this was happening for 6 days. The Israelites were coming and going. And imagine every day people inside Rahab's house thinking, okay, today is the day, now we will be saved. And then they're going home again. How would you feel? I'm sure they might be thinking, oh, what on earth is happening? Shall we have enough water? Shall we have enough food? Look at the kids, they haven't been outside for days. What are they doing? And everyone are so much in desperation, not knowing what will happen. And then the 7th day is coming, they're marching again. First time, and then the second time, and then the 3rd and 4th, and we know that they were marching for 7 days then. And in those moments, I'm sure that Rahab and her family thought, okay, there is something different. Finally, deliverance is on the horizon. So maybe these 7 days, thank you, Abigail, didn't make sense for them. And maybe your waiting time doesn't make any sense for you. But God has something bigger in plan. So how many times did you stop waiting for the Lord and wanting some actions in your life? So imagine how different would be this story if Rahab took the things in her hand. Just because she hasn't and because she was patient and she believed, Rahab was maintained in the book of Hebrews as one of the faithful. So her name is written on the hall of faith. Hebrews 11:31. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. And now, when I'm reading this verse, I would really love to see that it is written by faith Rahab, because she took the spies, was not killed. But every time we see Rahab's name in the Bible, it is always said Rahab the prostitute. So even she who had such a great faith and who changed her life completely and changed the history, even she always had that baggage with her, the consequences of her decisions. And then we see in the Bible that Rahab and her family was saved. When the army came, Joshua said to the spies, "Go and fulfill the promise to the Rahab." She took them, and then they lived among the Israelites. Probably that wasn't easy either. Everyone knew she was a prostitute, and then she just needed to live as one of them, as one of Israelites, the chosen one, the best one. People who always think that they are maybe better than others, and now there are some sinners among them. Rahab, a prostitute, she managed to escape and identified with the people of God. And in that way, she wrote the history. God rewarded her on such a marvelous way that her name is written in the lineage of Christ. She was one among these women, one among 5 women who were not Israelites and whose name was in the lineage of Christ. And we read it in Matthew 1:5. She married Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. And then we know what happens next with Jesus. So because of her faith, Rahab lived, same as her whole household. Her house was a place of safety. And now I wonder, where is the place of safety for us and for the people around us? Is it the church? What actually could be a safety for people? And thinking about Jericho in that time, Jericho was locked, everyone were full of fear. The city was under the judgment because of their sin. And same is happening today. The whole earth is under the judgment because of our sins. And people think, yeah, we have it under control. We are fine. We have big walls. We have what we need. We have our good politics. We have, our idols, our money, careers, education, people, sports people, all the other idols we could have. Even today, people worship all of these idols that they think could help them possibly in their lives, but they are not aware that the judgment day is coming. And once it appears, they will be looking for a place of safety. And I really wonder, is our church the place of safety? Is it for us? Is it for other people? And probably it shouldn't be. As Rahab was hanging on the promise, we as people can hang on the promise as well, knowing that when Judgment Day comes, we are going to be saved. How? and there is only one way, only through the blood of Jesus, through that red cord. And I'm sure that story of Rahab was in the Bible because it was God's plan to save her. And that's why Joshua sent the spies. And be sure that here, everywhere, God has his own faithful people everywhere, among every nations. And these people will be delivered on the judgment day. But it is our great responsibility to share our salvation with them. Rahab was saved because she believed, but we also have the responsibility to share our salvation with others.